International Airport, getting set to take off on this Denver, Minnesota, Milwaukee trip. Ben Beach, Jim Beach. Tradition started back in 2008 of trying to go to all these big league ballparks. So far I've gotten to the vast majority of them, but still a few more to do. So the game starts at 6:10. It is 6:10, and this is the scene at Coors Field. It's as if there's never been a baseball game here. They cannot get fans in. Unreal. All right, kind of an ordeal getting inside here at Coors Field, but got Giants Rockies going on, a place where the Giants typically don't play all that well. See how it goes today. That sucked. Giants dropping a 1-0 game to Colorado. They threatened in the 9th, but to no avail. Andy Suarez, their young left-hander, guy looks really good. He only had one mistake. He gave up a home run that ended up deciding the game. So I would have thought that if the Giants could come in here and only allow one run, that they would have probably won the game. Didn't quite work out that way. Anyway, going to Uber back to a hotel and then head on to Minnesota coming up in the morning. Day 2 of this trip. This is the Minnesota airport. Not 100% sure what's going to be happening today, but probably going to hit up Twins Orioles later tonight and do some random things along the way. Coming to you from downtown Minneapolis here on day 2 of this trip. Behind me is Target Field. That's where I'll be going tonight, although it's only about 1 o'clock in the afternoon right now. I'm just kind of getting a walk in. And then over here is the Target Center. Obviously a lot of Target advertising here in Minneapolis. One thing I like too is you can see right here how you have a bridge that goes from right here where the Target Center is, where the Timberwolves play, over here to the parking garage. In Minneapolis, they make a big deal to provide you with places that don't take you outside during the winter. Not the case right now, though, as it's the middle of July. But see a lot of that as you walk around the downtown area. Anyway, while I had a chance, I actually had a hand that I wanted to run over that was pretty interesting, and this kind of illustrates a mistake that I used to make very often when I started playing poker. One of the things that would happen was I wouldn't think things through in situations like this. So what had happened was, this came from last week at the Atlantis, and I wish I had video of it, but I don't. It was one of those days, by the way, where every time I would video hands for like an hour, I wouldn't get anything interesting. Then I would stop videoing for 15 minutes, and then I would have an interesting hand. So as a result, I didn't get a chance to capture any of the good hands, and all the hands I did capture, I just ended up throwing away because they weren't worth putting on the vlog anyway. But this hand certainly was. A guy who I had beaten out of a few pots, and clearly was not a very good player, but clearly wanted to try to beat me real bad. He raised to 15 from the button, and I am in the big blind that I'd call him for an extra 10 more with ace-6 of spades. And the flop comes out ace-6-3 with 2 clubs. So I kind of figured here, well, I don't know if this guy is the type that's going to just bluff at me, but if he does have something, and I were to donk lead at this flop, well, I could win quite a big pot. So that's what I decided to do. I donk lead for 20 bucks. He basically beats me into the pot with that $20. He snap calls me. So I'm thinking, all right, well, I was hoping he'd raise, but I'll take it nonetheless. the turn comes a jack. I'm definitely gonna be betting again here. I bet 50. He thinks about it for a long time before raising me to 135. So I'm like, huh, didn't expect that here, but there's no way I'm folding. I definitely could consider a re-raise here, but that would leave me open to the possibility of getting felted if he does have pocket threes or if he does have ace-jack. So I decided to just call this bet. The river comes another jack, counterfeiting my aces up for a board of ace, 6, jack, jack, 3, and I have ace 6. I check, and what I talked about a second ago with making a mistake, there would be times where I would instantly check fold this given the fact that I'm counterfeited. I checked and he bet out 250. And I thought about it for a while. Definitely didn't really think that this guy would be the type that would bluff here, but ultimately I kind of changed my mind on that, because what could he really have here? Obviously he could have ace-jack, but what do I really have to worry about here other than that? If he had pocket threes, I'm convinced he's raising me on the flop. When he snap called the flop bet, I put him on some sort of a pair, but not a very strong one, because I could tell he was itching to re-raise me. So, with that in mind, I was leaning towards a call. Then, get this. This is the interesting part. I actually made the comment of, what a river card for me, or something like that, to try to get a reaction out of him. And I'll be damned if I didn't get one. Because he says, Ben, I'll bet you 50 bucks I can call your hand. So he says that about my hand. And I'll say, well, I kind of just made it give you a clue as to what my hand could be. Anyway, I decided to go ahead and pay off the 250 after that comment, and undoubtedly, as I'm sure most of you would have. And he shows the 9-3. So we did hit a pair. He raised with the 9-3 and decided that he was going to try to bluff. Didn't work out for him in this spot, but an interesting case of speech playing a role here, and then a case of really thinking a hand through, ruling out any hand that makes sense, despite your hand being counterfeited. By the way, I just had a woman ask me for money here in Minneapolis, trying to give me this whole story about how her and her kids are in trouble and they need help, and all the while she's smoking a cig. I mean, it's sad, I know, but you know, if you're gonna do that, you can't be smoking a cig and expect me to help you out. You just can't be doing it. Checking in here high above Target Field, checking out Twins, Orioles. A meaningless game in my mind, nothing to care about there. Just checking another ballpark off the list. This for me makes 31 ballparks. Still haven't gotten to all the current ballparks though. So some work to do there, but pretty cool here as you take a look from the upper level at Target Field. Heading out of Minneapolis on a Friday morning, going to be driving over to Green Bay and then ultimately down to Milwaukee. I wonder if that could be Tim Dressen's car right there. I don't think he plays poker, but there's a big podcast, or a popular podcast anyway, called 500 by Midnight, That's a husband and wife who love traveling to Las Vegas, and they live here in the Twin Cities. So we stopped by the Mall of America. Not really planning to buy anything, it's just one of those things figured that would be worth seeing, and as you can see by looking over this direction, it's not just a mall, but we got an amusement park in the middle of it too. All right, heading from Minneapolis to Green Bay, one NFC North city to another. About a 4-hour drive. It's past Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, famous for that being the hometown of Jack Dawson.
You of the Boston Dawsons?
No, the Chippewa Falls Dawsons, actually.
Oh, yes.
All right, checking in here at Lambeau Field, the frozen tundra in Green Bay. Not exactly the best time to be here though. Obviously it's the middle of summer. We're hoping to take the actual stadium tour, but apparently we just missed the last one here, showing up here at about 5:30 on a Saturday night. So it's still kind of cool to see around the places that you can go in, but doesn't look like we're going to be able to see all that much. Well, it's pretty clear that here in Wisconsin, if you're going to find a casino, it's going to be of the tribal variety. Now that's the case here at Oneida Casino in Green Bay. If you want to watch a Packer game and then go play some no limit hold'em, this will be the only place to go. Wrapping up a session here at Oneida Casino in Green Bay. All they had was 1-3. They actually had a 2-5 PLO game going on, which was interesting, but my PLO game is not very sharp. I used to play a decent amount online back in 2010, but haven't played live PLO before, so didn't jump into that. Decided for the 1-3 instead, and the 1-3 game is everything that you expect a 1-3 game to be. Obviously, opponents of a very different skill level than they're going to find even in the 3-5 games. But did have an interesting session. Started out kind of slow. There was a hand where we got 2 limps, and I picked up pocket queens on the button. And this is a 1-3 game, so I make it 15. I get 2 callers, and the flop comes 8-4 deuce rainbow. I bet 30. And everyone folds. There was a hand where, not too long after that, I raised to 10 with ace-10. And I end up getting the big blind and the button to call. And the flop comes ace-7-5 rainbow. I bet out 20, the button calls, and the big blind folds. The turn comes to 10 of clubs. I go ahead and bet 25, and the button makes the call. The river comes to 9 of clubs, bringing in backdoor clubs. Still hard to believe here that top 2 pair wouldn't be any good though, so I bet 50. He thinks about it for a minute, finally ends up laying it down. So we take down a fairly nice one there. As I get inside this Ford Taurus, a rental car we picked up in Minneapolis. Run down a few more hands here while the battery on my Sony camera holds out. Let's see if it does. Shortly after that, there's a straddle under the gun, and UTG1 calls. And I believe the straddle was to 6. For some reason, I'm not 100% convinced that it was, but I think that it was to 6 in this 1-3 game. I am on the button, pocket kings, and I had just run a couple of smaller bluffs that didn't work. I know it's pretty stupid to be bluffing in 1-3 to begin with, but there was a few spots that I think called for it that didn't happen to work out for me. But so I had that image in mind. I may get 25 over the straddle and this call, and the straddle thinks about it after the blinds fold and finally ends up making the call. The limper under the gun +1 ships all in for 65. She's pretty short stacked. I decide not to re-raise right now. I want to try to keep the straddle in. He's definitely the fish in the game, and not a guy you want to get out of his hand. So I go ahead and just call. And to my astonishment, he then raises me 100 more. He makes it 160, and he's only playing about that much behind as well. So I have him covered, obviously. I'm putting him all in here. He makes the call, he snap calls, and he ends up having pocket 7s. Pocket 7s. The board actually ran out 8, 9, 10 to give him an open-ender, but fortunately for me it didn't get there. The player under the gun +1 who had shoved all in claimed that she had pocket, or she had ace-jack, that is. So I end up taking down a nice one there. But that then got us to maybe the most interesting spot of the night, where we get 2 limps, and I have pocket 9s on the button. I make it 25 over these 2 limps, and the big blind calls, and the cutoff calls. So there's 75 in the pot, 3 ways, and we see a flop of 8, 9, jack. The big blind checks, and the cutoff ships all in immediately for his last $65. Here's the interesting part of this hand. I make the call, obviously. I want to see if I can actually bring this big blind along with me here now that I have a set. And he literally says out loud, and this guy is probably 75 years old, but he says, what the hell? And he puts in the 65 as well out of the big blind. Poker's not dead. And a 1-3 game in Green Bay is unlikely to be a shark fest. All right, well, the battery on my digital camera dead, so we are switching over to the iPhone to wrap up this hand. And I believe we had just gone to the turn. The turn brings an 8, so I make a full house. He checks, and I bet 75, thinking that he probably has a weak jack in this spot after that speech. He calls. I bet 75, he calls. And the river comes a complete disaster for me. It comes a jack. So it counterfeits my full house. And I'm actually already wondering, though, can I still possibly value bet here if he doesn't bet? Well, I don't have to think about that because he does bet. He bets 125. And I'm getting a pretty decent price on a call here. But this is a 75-year-old man. I put him on a jack the entire way. You really think he's going to be running a bluff here in a 1-3 game in Green Bay, Wisconsin? Does it really seem likely to me, or does he always have a jack here? I actually didn't think it was a very hard decision here at all. I threw the hand away, and because I knew he was going to have to show his hand too. That was another part of it because there's another player all in. So I throw the hand away. Obviously, it's kind of a disgusting fold to have to make, but I think an easy fold to make. He shows King Jack. So he had King Jack of Hearts, so he ends up taking that one down, and I avert further damage by a good river fold there. So Won a few more small pots after that, then ultimately booked a $380 win. I will certainly take it. And kind of a weird place to play some poker. I never thought I'd be here playing some poker. I thought I'd be here watching the 49ers play the Packers, something crazy like that, but ends up being a pretty good night nonetheless here in Green Bay, Wisconsin.